So, Aimee Norman, this is for my SSI. I'm going to ask you a few questions. So, as a music student, do you believe that opera is popular, and if not, why?
Not in a massively strong sense, if you know what I mean. It's like not in the chart, it's not like, I don't listen.
However, Susan Boyle went into the charts, didn't she?
Yeah.
With like the Les Mis thing that she did.
So did Paul Potts.
Yep.
So I think that is probably one thing that has brought it to the forefront to a lot of people. They'd be like, wow. But I mean, if you think about it, that was a one-off thing. That was because of a talent show that a lot of people watch. And I think that was like a massive part of it. The fact of that it was there at the time. I mean, you think of all the other things that have become really popular off of a talent show, like that gypsy guy that did everybody thought was going to be crap and he wasn't, and that got that song brought back into the charts. So
do you think opera is hard for people to get into from a young age?
Yeah. Yes and no. If you have pushy parents, then no. But if you have, even at a younger age, even like I was looking back at our interview today, like when you said that you didn't have a lot of friends in school because when they found out that you did opera, they were like, I don't really want to know about you. I think the pressure of that is immense, and especially when people are just like, oh, why did you do that? Why did you do that? That's not cool. That's not hip, you know. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Given the chance, would you go and watch an opera? And if not, why?
I probably would, just for the fact I've never been before.
And it's the experience as well.
It would just be a laugh, I think.
Do you think that, like, obviously, if you've never seen an opera before,
no.
Do you think that after going to see one, it would change your opinions on it?
Probably, to be fair. Obviously, I probably appreciate the amount of training and all that lot that goes into it.
Because a lot of people don't know how much training it takes, because there are a lot of like, to get a principal role as a woman, if I was to go join an opera society or whatever, I wouldn't be allowed a principal role until I was 25 to 30, because they just don't let you. Your voice isn't mature enough, and obviously you've got to do so much training anyway, and a lot of people don't actually know how much work you have to put in to actually hit the big time. Do you think that if people kind of understood more about it, that they'd appreciate it more?
I think all those that have seen one or know somebody in it, they understand that, but those people who don't know anything about it just won't. They just will never. I mean, there are people out there, like obviously Catherine Jenkins is ridiculously huge and a lot of people know about her. She does Royal Variety. I mean, she was on Doctor Who, and it was an incredible episode. And obviously a lot of people are just like, well, she's barefoot, so, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Do you think that, like, obviously you were talking about the whole Susan Boyle thing and the Paul Potts, do you think that, like, obviously they got, like, Susan Boyle got, like, pretty, not famous, but she got very well known because of, not because of what she was singing, because it was very unexpected that she was actually going to be able to sing.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, there's a lot of artists that are household names, like Pavarotti, like, quite a lot of people know who Pavarotti is. However, they may not have necessarily gone on actually watching an opera. Do you think that there's a big difference between people knowing Pavarotti because he sang Nessun Dorma at the World Cup once and actually going to see an opera?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, people will hear it, will appreciate it, but they won't go out of their way to see an opera. They just won't. They'll be like, oh yeah, that was cool. Like when Catherine Jenkins does her little things on TV, like when Susan Boyle did her own little night thing. Like a lot of people watch that, and a lot of people probably would have wanted tickets to see that, but not specifically go out of their way to turn around and go, oh, I want to go to an opera. But saying that, I think it's kind of coming back into trend. Like, there's a lot more. Like, I think they died out a bit, and I think people were a bit like, oh, I can't really be bothered. It was like kind of a rich person thing. That's, I think, where it comes from. It's like, I think to a lot of people, a lot of common people, it's like that's a rich person's thing. It's going to be boring.
In the 17th century, if you were an opera singer, you weren't actually making enough money to live off. It was a very, very difficult job to do because there wasn't a lot of people that were interested in it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, by the beginning of the classical era, because obviously Mozart started writing at the end of the Baroque, like crossover between Baroque and classical, that it suddenly all kicked off, and there was international stars in like the 17th century that were like touring Europe and seeing all these dignitaries and stuff, and you know, dignitaries would come from everywhere to just see these operas. Do you think that that's ever going to happen like in the future again?
I think we've kind of that's a completely different society. Back then it was like I said, like it was for very rich people. They were very expensive, they still are. And I think that, well, now and a bit more in the future, they'll become less expensive. More people will probably want to choose to see them. Like, I mean, even musical theatre, because I mean, even though it's not the same as an opera, it's still like a lot of people are classically trained, a lot of people in that kind of sense and all that lot, is making it more popular.
Do you think that if more like sort of operas and performances like that were made more accessible, be that as it may, whether it was more local or cheaper prices, do you think that would make more people go? Or do you think that it's still the whole stigma of opera's only for posh people, it's ridiculous, I don't want to listen to it?
It's always going to have that stigma because of its history. It's always going to have it. It's also a very particular art form. A lot of people obviously will think it boring and they don't like that style of music. They're not really into it. But then if it becomes, like you said, more accessible, especially in local places, like you only really hear of massive operas in London, and it's expensive. It's ridiculously expensive. I mean, you can get
the train ticket is alone like £55, so
exactly.
I completely agree with you there.
You have to travel there, you have to travel back, you
pay for your ticket there, pay for a meal. I completely agree with you, and I think it's a shame because if it was easier to go, like, you know, if they had like little opera performances at the Lights, it would be so much easier. But then again, would they get enough crowd to fill the seats and make a profit in the Lights themselves?
I think I know where you're coming from, like completely and utterly. Like, I mean, I would love to go see one, but at the same time, I'd probably love to see one in London with ridiculously
like
well-trained people, massive performance, like to be fully moved. But then, you know, I think this town probably holds the stigma. So does Basingstoke. So there's a lot of little towns that are just like, can't be able to go, this, that, like that. But then again, it's the same for a lot of theatre shows themselves.
Do you think that that obviously we were talking about the Britain's Got Talent, X Factor side of stuff. Do you think that if more people went on there and were to sing opera and classical stuff, it would kind of give opera a new life? Or do you think that a lot of people don't actually get through on these talent shows because the people that run them know that there are not going to be a lot of people interested?
Well, this is the difference between X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, and also The Voice, because X Factor and The Voice are looking for a voice that can sing a range of styles to please everyone. Whereas Britain's Got Talent is more of you're being put on the Royal Variety Show, where
obviously the Queen's going to be there and it's royalty,
and
there's obviously a different level of class there.
Yeah, that, and also, I mean, anyone can go for it. Dance troupes, anything. Like it's literally if you have a talent. So it could be anything at the end of the day. And you know, I mean, this is why Susan Boyle got so big, because she had the availability on that show. But you see people that go through to the X Factor that have the operatic voices, but they don't get very far because people find them boring and they want pop. And they know that that's what they want, and they manufacture it. Like if you went for X Factor, I don't think you'd probably get through the first auditions, and that's how horrible it is.
That's how it works, yeah. Quite a lot of operas were obviously written quite a long time ago, and quite a lot of them are in Italian or French or German. There's a lot of German operas. There are, however, quite a few English ones as well. Do you think that if there were more English operas that were sang and performed in English, do you think that would make a lot more people interested?
Yes.
Because when I was 14, I went and saw Carmen, and that's all in French. And I was like, I don't understand what they were going on about. However, they had a big screen up and they had the words in English of what they were actually singing. And I said that to Aimee, but she said she'd rather, the other Aimee, she said that she would rather actually not have to read it off the screen and actually understand what they were singing, because obviously that it makes you more emotional because you're having to keep flicking from reading the English lyrics to actually listening, you know what I mean, and watching the performance. Do you think that if there were more English operas?
I like, well, it's good that they did that, to be fair. It's like, you wouldn't, especially if you had something in the lights and they were performing something in Italian, then people would be like, what is going on? Yeah. But then at the same time, like, I can hardly understand what an opera person's saying anyway when they're singing in that style. I find it very difficult to pick out
it's
words.
like anything though, you listen to quite, I don't know, do you listen to a lot of like screamery stuff anymore? Yeah, because obviously like when I first started listening to it, like especially Parkway Drive, I was like, what are they actually saying? And you do have to listen, and it does take a while to get used to. Do you think that
will put people off?
Do you think it will?
Yeah, because people will be there like, I just want to watch a show in plain English and understand it.
Actually understand it, and I'll have to work at understanding it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still love to see one, even though I probably wouldn't understand the thing that's going on. I mean, is Les Mis an opera? Les
Mis.
It's more of a.
It's musical theatre. However, the definition of an opera is a story that's sang from beginning to end. Les Mis, the 25th anniversary concert, has no speaking words in it whatsoever, apart from about 3, and there are some very, very difficult discrepancies as to whether it is musical theatre or opera. I would say that it was hardcore musical theatre, bordering on very closely to opera. But then again, like since Susan Boyle obviously went on Britain's Got Talent, was it? Britain's Got Talent, not X Factor. She went on Britain's Got Talent and then sang I Dreamed a Dream, and then suddenly the new film of Les Mis was being made.
I reckon that's what made the
new film.
The film, but not only that, the 25th anniversary
more popular.
Ridiculously popular. When you have that right there in front of you, and then you go, oh, what's that from? Like, and then people are googling it, and then you see a rise in popularity of it, and then you probably see ticket sales at something go up, and then they decide to endorse it as the 25th anniversary because it's coming up, and they probably would have done something for it, but it wouldn't have been as huge as it has been.
Do you think that, because obviously things go around in fashion, like there's a lot of music now that people are listening to that was played in the 80s and 70s that's now suddenly the cool thing to listen to. Do you think that opera's ever going to come back round and be more popular?
I think it's coming back round now. I think it is now. I mean, especially with Les Mis, I mean, even though it is musical theatre and it is bordering on opera, I think it's pushing people into that kind of thing, like, oh, I like that, what's like that? And it's just like the closest thing to it is opera.
Have you seen Les Mis, the film?
No, I haven't. Is it good?
It's amazing, Aimee.
I really want to see it. I want to see it in the cinema, but nobody will come with me.
Me and my sister, we've been brought like when I was in my mum's belly, my mum used to play me Mozart when like I was a baby, you know, I wasn't actually popped out yet, and I was still listening to like classical stuff.
Popped out, like she probably
definitely, because it does, and there have been studies that shown that babies listening to Mozart, it does relax them and it does make them feel okay, because it's just calming and soothing. And like, do you think that as you get older, like, because obviously when I was really little, I was listening to like Meatloaf from my dad when you interviewed me and stuff, and obviously you have the boy bands like S Club 7 and McFly, S Club 7, you know what I mean, like, and they're quite highly promoted on kids' TV shows. Do you think that if more, not necessarily classical artists were promoted, but do you think that if there were more TV shows for children that had little snippets of like classical music and opera and stuff, it would kind of get them to appreciate it more?
Well, I think a lot of that's the way a lot of things are going. I mean, it makes sense to use that kind of music if it works. And I know one of my friends, Cherie, her mum used to put classical music on for her every night without fail. She used to fall asleep to it, even when she was like, I think in primary school. One of our teachers told us about it, and she got really embarrassed by it, and we kind of teased her a little bit about it, but it wasn't anything bad. We didn't care. Like, it's just music at the end of the day, and you listen to it like it's all through life. Like, it's always there, it's a part of history, but I didn't really start listening or thinking about listening to it until I got into GCSE. And when I did GCSE music, and you go through the time periods and realise what you hate and what you love, because I absolutely hate Baroque. I cannot stand it. I hate the harpsichord. I want to smash it with an axe. It's the most disgustingly sounding thing. That and a recorder. I think that would be my worst nightmare. Sitting in a room, somebody playing a recorder and a harpsichord, I could cry. But, you know, like, classical music is so dynamic. It's fucking excellent. It's so cool. But
have you always had that opinion though, or is it like as you've kind of come to college and you've kind of, it sounds really weird, but that, like, obviously when you're at school, you're very aware of other people around you, and you're very aware of other people's opinions. Do you think that because you've had that transition between being at school and coming to college where no one really gives a fuck and you can be yourself more, do you think that that's kind of made you have that opinion where you find it more, you know, dynamic and amazing and stuff?
Well, like, I think when I was younger, I think it used to be like, oh, classical music's boring, nobody likes classical music, it's all about the new pop song, it's always like about Eminem, that. It is always about that, because you're trying so hard to impress people, and I think that's like, if you turn around, like at my age, if I turn around and went, yeah, I've been to see an opera, it'd be like, oh, fair enough. But at that age, it'd be like, oh, I've been to see an opera. It'd be like, well, why did you go see that? Like, what's the point? But then again,
it's like with everything though.
If I turn around to my mum and was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go see an opera, she'd be like, well, why do you want to go do that? Like,
I know you don't know a lot about like certain types of opera, but from what you know, do you think that the way opera is performed and the way it's perceived has changed from like way back when, from the 17th century to now, or do you think it's always going to be a sort of underground thing for common people, but a very popular thing for sort of the upper class?
I think, well, it's always going to be popular in upper class, because it's always going to be one of those things like, oh, you're going to the opera, I'm going to the opera. But I think it's becoming more popular among the more common people, because it's just a thing to do, and it's a thing to be like, I've done that at least once in my life, and people can turn around and say whether they've enjoyed it or not. I think a lot of people these days rely on experiences more than like that kind of stigma. But so I can imagine that quite a lot of people go to see the opera these days, but it's never going to be as popular as it has been. I really don't think it is, because back in the day, like you said, in the 17th century when people were becoming stars of opera, there was a pop, like that classical music was the way forward. It was the
only
pop
sort of
at the
entertainment, really, wasn't it?
It was the pop at the time, and it does what it does in film. I mean, if you think about it, film is classical music. I think people don't understand that. I mean, you watch Star Wars, like you're a massive Star Wars fan, and that's all orchestral.
Do you like Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yes.
Have you ever listened to the soundtrack on Pirates of the Caribbean?
Times.
And you enjoy that, don't you?
Yeah, I like I like scores to films. I have a lot of scores.
Like the Lord of the Rings score is quite popular as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I know it's very different from opera, but do you think that if more people actually understood the storyline of the opera and understood what people were singing about, that they'd actually be like, oh my god, like they're putting this much energy and like emotion into this, like how can they do that? Do you think that would make people more interested?
Yeah, I think it would probably push people to see it more. I mean, I just think there's just a lot of stigma around it. I mean, like, I'm just thinking about it now. I used to have a lot of scores. I used to have the Pirates of the Caribbean one, all the True Blood stuff, because it's really cool. Like, the strings on it are amazing, and like the way it makes you feel tense and all that lot is so cool. But then again, I'm a massive True Blood fan. I also had another one on the Doctor Who stuff, because I'm a geek. But just anything. I think like Hans Zimmer. What else did he do? He did Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean. I can't even think. He's done so much. Did he do the Robin Hood one?
I don't know.
He's done so much stuff.
He's done
loads.
He's done ridiculous. I mean, like big blockbuster films.
Well, like Gladiator, the soundtrack for Gladiator. You know, Josh Honey that used to go here. Yeah. He used to be absolutely obsessed with that, and like it because he loved it. But that's like he's one of the guys that's kind of like metalhead. You know what I mean? Like big stretches, and yet he was listening to something that was so beautiful, and it's nice when you get that. But I just don't think. I agree with you. I don't think it's never going to be as popular as what it used to be. I'd love for it to be.
It's going to be. It's like very clicky. I mean, like with any genre of music these days, the biggest is going to be pop. And if you think about it, in the 17th century, the equivalent of pop was opera and classical music. That's all they had. They didn't have guitars where they could do all this crap that they do today. But then again, a lot of people, without even realising it, appreciate it. Like, appreciate classical music, like, ridiculous.
The thing is, it is everywhere though, like, it's always on the telly, like, it's soundtracks to films, like you were saying, it is everywhere. I just think people
don't realise.
Yeah, and it's sad because it's almost as if it is just only used as background noise nowadays, whereas before it was, I'm going to go see an opera because people are talented. It's a shame because it was something to do, and it was a form of entertainment that people thought extremely highly of. And now, fair enough, there are still circles of people that do still appreciate opera like to the max, but you know, it's a completely different world nowadays. So, thank you, Aimee. Love you.